Video games. They're pretty good. Like most people who grew up in this part of the world, I mainly played PlayStation games. I only owned 4 consoles in my entire life, and that was the PlayStation 1 through 4. I did, however, play House of the Dead 2 and Claw on my dad's epic Windows XP beast of a word processor. And by the way, Claw is a better platformer than Mario Odyssey. Fight me, Reggie. Can we get an F for Reggie? A lot of gamers like to go back to these older console generations and play some of the classics, like Final Fantasy X, Masterpiece, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, look at this platform, Resident Evil 4, look at this spooky shit, and Devil May Cry. Now originally this video was just gonna be about Devil May Cry and how I tried finishing the whole series in preparation for Devil May Cry 5. Super excited for that, by the way. But in preparation for that and me trying to finish the first Devil May Cry, I realized how horribly outdated most of these games are. If you know me in real life, then you know I'm all about the looks. I always wear the best clothes. I always follow the latest fashion trends. I'm always on the top of my game. And I'm no different when it comes to video games. In the case of Abzu, I spent over 30 minutes, an hour maybe on each level just appreciating how gorgeous the game looks. And notice how I said gorgeous, not realistic. In the case of Breath of the Wild, for example, not the most realistic looking game, but ask anyone and they'll tell you that it's one of the prettiest. Here's how I think about it. Maybe in this other dimension, people just evolved to look this way. Maybe they just happen to grow up that way. And if the game just looks that pretty, it helps me get more immersed and value these characters more. If I wanted to play something realistic, I might go for maybe a Spider-Man. But definitely not a Final Fantasy VII. And speaking of Final Fantasy 15, one of the most gorgeous looking games. I mean, Donkey did give it a 3 out of 5, but the fact that the game looks so good elevates it so much. Camera works? I doubt it. This is the comedy police, the joke's too funny! Now when it comes to horrible camera placements, Devil May Cry and Resident Evil are the biggest culprits. At first I gave Devil May Cry a pass, you know, on PlayStation 1 they didn't have the DualShock, pretty understandable why they did the whole camera thing. Capcom, please explain. When it comes to a game like Devil May Cry, a game that severely punishes you for every single mistake you make, when the camera goes left when you want it to go right, that could be frustrating, and I'm not saying the game is bad, I'm just saying something that we take for granted nowadays. It just ruins the whole experience. But this next one is a game breaker. Literally. Thank you.
This is the first time Lord 1708 has been awarded the best joke on Lord Ghandar Productions, a highly regarded show amongst lords all over the multiverse.
Controls. Now this could make or break a game. Bad controls can ruin a perfect game. A game like Claw wouldn't be Claw without the tight controls. Now I know I already brought up Spider-Man, but Spider-Man wouldn't have been well received and even nominated for Game of the Year without the tight zipping and swinging mechanics and even the crawling mechanics. Sure, some of these older games feel better with maybe mouse and keyboard. We switch to a controller and they feel great. But if your game feels bad on both, then you messed up. Now this isn't a huge problem for most people, but it does affect the narrative of the game. And that's voice acting.
Prince, of all the possible futures, this one held the most promise, but something has changed.
Do not worry, Kailina. No harm will come to you in Babylon.
Ubisoft. What the hell is this? Go back to the trash where you belong. You'll never make a good game. You never made a good game. What are you doing here?
Just kill yourself!
The whole company. Hold hands and just... As a person with only 10 friends, 4 of whom are epic gamers, I needed a second opinion. So I went to the big boys. IGN, GameSpot, and all these game critics. When they go to older games, you always see how, oh, I felt nostalgic playing this game. It made me feel like going home from school to play my PS2. Nostalgia is the reason we're getting shit like this. Now, before we get any further, I just want to get music out of the way. I think music is the one thing that holds up in most of these games, but it's such a broad topic that it deserves its own video. I'm not necessarily gonna make a video on it, but I think it's such a broad topic that it's gonna take way too long to just talk about music. I know what most of you are thinking. This 17-year-old with 50 subs on YouTube is discussing games as old as he is and is bashing them. At the end of the day, video games, like any art form, are subjective. So if you can get past the crummy visuals, the bad voice acting, the rough controls, and the bad camera works, then more power to you. You can play some of the best games ever made. Also support me on Patreon or I'll kill myself.